Hello, I'm Jenny Fern. I am a chaotic neutral mechanical engineer who is really into books and wants to talk about gardening. So today I want to talk about how you can grow plants to use in tea. We're starting indoors today because I've recently harvested a whole bunch of plant material that I'm going to incorporate into a tea blend. So I'd like to talk about a handful of the plants that I grow in my food forest that I harvest for tea frequently, and some of the other plants that are possible of incorporating into teas. And then I would like to show you some of that out in the garden actually. First of all, one of the absolutely easiest plants to grow for use in tea is mint. And I have a ton of mint in my yard, and I have a few varieties that I really like to use. One variety that I have, and I think this is it, but we will go out to a spot where I know I planted it. This is mojito mint. And like the name implies, it is really good for like a fresh beverage, like a mojito, but it's also really good dried and added into a mint mixed tea. I also have this orange mint, which smells really good. There are so many different varieties of mint, and I only have a handful, but having all of these different flavors, especially mixed together, you get like a really complex and unique blend of tea. And here we have probably my favorite smell, and that is peppermint. It just smells so great. It looks a lot like the orange mint. And when I moved into my yard, I had this mint growing in my raised beds, which means I have a raised bed entirely full of mint at this point. And it's actually really useful, so I don't really weed it. I think this is spearmint or something akin to spearmint. And then I also have something that looks like apple mint in my yard also before I moved in here, and I haven't really ever used it. So yeah, mint. So just a super quick tip to identify something that is in the mint family, which doesn't mean that it is going to be an edible mint. So be aware and know what you're working with, what you're dealing with. They have a square stem. When you hold on to the stem, you'll notice there's like corners, and it's a square stem. It's also an indicator that it's probably like really easy to propagate. If I strip these leaves off, trim off the top so that we don't lose a bunch of water due to evaporation through the leaves, this will root all along this stem. So when you are picking or trimming or whatever mint, if it does land on the ground and it is in a moist environment, it is pretty likely that it will root. Mint is considered a very weedy plant because it does spread very easily. The roots underground will send up more like shoots of the mint further and further away, so it will spread across your yard. And for me, I'm really happy about that. I'm really encouraging of plants covering up the ground because I do want plants that are useful to me to cover the ground. And I'm perfectly happy having mint take that place. I have recently weeded a ton of mint out of my beds for my peach tree guild because I don't want it everywhere all of the time. Be somewhat cautious with where you plant it if you don't want it to spread all over the place. And you can be really rigorous with pulling it up, tearing it out, and it'll probably still come back. It is also an excellent ground cover, and when it does flower, the flowers are really good for pollinators. Flavor-wise, it tastes like mint. Mint tea tastes like mint. It's soothing and refreshing. It's quite nice. The next plant that I have, I don't have any harvests of it today because for me it is a summer crop, truly, and that is lemongrass. Lemongrass does get damaged or killed by frost, so you have to be either somebody who will take things in if there is frost, cover things during frost, or otherwise reseed each year. I'm trying out something where I am planting it in a spot that I know is somewhat frost-free year-round. Maybe in certain years it will get some frost. So right now I have some very small lemongrass seedlings that have made it through the winter, and I'm waiting for warmer weather for those to kind of kick off. Lemongrass smells and tastes really lovely. It's really great in tea blends, and it is a grass. When you harvest it, it can cut up your hands because it does have that like razor sharp edge to the grass, but it has been a really lovely plant to have in the garden, and it is a genuinely useful grass to have around. It is also quite easy to grow from seed, at least in my experience. Lavender. I have a lavender, and now I just got a second variety, and the flowers are nice to dry and crumble up into a tea blend. I wouldn't do a straight lavender tea on its own. That seems maybe a bit too floral. Lavender sprinkled into like your mint tea, for example, is really nice and calming. I have another flower that I just have so much of, and I do have a harvest of this today. That is calendula. Calendula is also called pot marigold. It produces yellow and orange flowers. And sometimes I love looking at the variety of all of these calendula, because there are some that have certain pattern variations, like these all have slightly lighter color at the tips of the petals, and then we have some that are like monochromatic. Instead of having a dark center, they have either a full orange center like this one, or they have a full yellow center. So I grow a ton of calendula. Oh, and here, for example, we have this really pale one that also has that light coloring on the ends of the petals. So I have a whole bunch here because I actually grow this along my fence line, and to basically prevent weeds from growing there, I'd rather have calendula growing there. It's pretty. It makes me look like a good neighbor. So I was just trimming it back out of the sidewalk so that anybody who's like on a skateboard or in a wheelchair or something will be able to roll over just fine. Here you can see a string of calendula that I dried earlier this year. And I can take all of these petals and I can combine this in with a tea. Calendula itself is not really flavorful at all. I think it has some benefits. It's really good topically applied to the skin for like inflammation and stuff like that. So I use it in like a salve for my face, and I really like it. So for its use in tea, I don't think it has any really big flavor benefit or anything, but it does make it look pretty and like a little bit fancy. The other item that I use in my tea blends a lot, I haven't harvested today, but I could, and I can show you some. That is fennel. So I will put this into like a food processor once it's dry and grind it up into kind of a bit of a powder and add it up to the tea blend. And fennel is a little bit overpowering on its own, in my opinion, but it does just add like a certain fennel flavor. So again, combining all of these flavors into one tea makes it really nice and complex, and gives you all those feelings that these ingredients on their own kind of relax you, like make you feel soothed in some sort of way. Fennel is exceedingly easy to grow, at least in my climate. I do grow Florence fennel for the bulb-like stems, and I use that kind of like onion in my cooking. And with all of the tops, I usually just dry them and use them for tea because I'm not a super big fan of the fennel tops themselves. And I also have other varieties of fennel that just give the leafy tops. I've found that fennel is really, really easy to grow from seed. I should have mentioned lavender and mint. I don't think are easy to grow from seed, but I've had really great success with cuttings of mint. Obviously, it wants to grow that way. And with lavender as well, I've also had really good success with getting the cuttings of lavender to root. There are also items like rose petals themselves, also rose hips in the fall. I like to harvest the rose hips and dry them and grind them and add them to tea. It gives a really big vitamin C boost to your tea, and I really like the flavor of rose hips. It's like one of the most opulent things to take maybe like a third of your rose hip harvest after they've dried out and boil them and make a pure rose hip tea. Oh, it's just such a beautiful rose flavor with a little cream and some sugar. It's like really, really opulent. Also, lemon. I have had times when there's like a bit of a frost or maybe slugs that damage my lemons. And so I will harvest maybe too many that I can use at one time. So I have in the past sliced them, dried them out in the oven a little bit, and then you get these really, really nice slices of dried lemon that you can then use in either hot water or in your tea as well. So I'm looking for my lemon slices. Look, I found a whole bunch of calendula. I have even more than that. And then another one of my tea blends. This one says mint calendula cleavers. So I'll talk about cleavers in a little bit. But the lemons, oh, I also have a rose hip in here, or a handful of rose hips in here. So see, these are the dried lemons. They smell so good. Genuinely, it's really nice. I just mentioned that that tea blend has cleavers, and I can show you cleavers. I can also do a huge harvest of cleavers because it's a weed in my garden. They are those sticky little leaves. They grow real tall. They have these little white flowers, and then they have those little balls that get stuck to you. And those little balls can be used as a coffee substitute. So I'm really curious to try that out this year as well. Those are supposed to have some sort of medicinal quality, and I'd have to look that up because I can't remember, but I think it has to do with like kind of like draining your fluids. Like, I don't think they have a wonderful flavor on their own, so I think they're better to mix in with other things like for medicinal uses. And then the other thing that I have heard of and never tried is blackberry or raspberry leaf tea. And I do have some blackberries that I could harvest fresh young leaves from and make a blackberry leaf tea. So those are my kind of oddball teas. I would love to hear if you've seen other plants in my garden that I can use for tea, what they are and how to use them. That would be great. I know there are also some root teas that I haven't yet explored. That would be dandelion root tea and chicory root tea as, again, coffee substitutes. And I'd be really curious to try out the 3 coffee substitutes. I think that'd be so fun. But so far, I don't really like digging things up when they're perennials, because then I know they're not going to be there next year, and dandelions have such great greens. Chicory also have beautiful greens, so I want them to proliferate more in my yard before I go digging them up. There is one thing that I totally forgot to mention, and that's chamomile. So I have some dried chamomile. It smells so good. And I grew this last year. I think it should come up this year. I don't know. I'm a little worried that my chamomile might have died. It smells great, and I really should make some chamomile tea. So I have not found that chamomile is the easiest to grow. I have a few different varieties of seeds. There's like a German chamomile and then some other variety. And I only really had one plant do okay. And like I said, I don't know if it's still kicking. We just have these really, really extremely hot summers. I'm not sure if it's the best plant for that environment. I don't know. If you have tips for growing chamomile, I'd really appreciate it. I definitely will try again because it seems like a really useful plant to have self-propagate and continue on in the garden. I'll talk to you in the garden soon or later. So it is far later in the day, and this is a patch of my mint. This is the mojito mint that I mentioned in the video. And you can see it's relatively contained because it's in this rock border. So it hasn't yet gone into this area. I also have this mint here, which I am hoping will fill in as a nice ground cover here. This is the peppermint, and I really, really like having the peppermint. I think it smells great and is really useful in the teas. Here and really everywhere else in the garden, I have calendula. So you can see I have a whole bunch. Like over here I have some more, and I have more over there, and I have even more over there. So this is what I'm not really sure what it is, but it's really tasty. I think this is something like spearmint, and this again was in this garden bed when we moved in. We also have this mint, which is slightly different from that spearmint, that I don't ever use. It's very fuzzy, and it is all in the lawn. So all of this is that mint, and you can see it all the way over there too. But like I said, I don't really use any of this. So in here I have a patch of that orange mint. You can see I also have the mint from the lawn over here because I put grass clippings over here. So I've just been weeding these whenever I come across them. And I'll just put that on top and hope it doesn't root. If it does root, I'll just pull it up again. And over here, I have some of that fennel. This is the Florence fennel. So I usually use this for the bulbs, but this is what I'll end up using in the tea. I also mentioned roses and rose hips. So here you can see some remaining little rose hips on this rose bush, and a little rose bud as well. Although this plant I don't really ever use for tea because it's not super fragrant. So here in the base of my avocado, I have some really weeny, sad lemongrass because it has gone through the winter, but it's pretty exciting. I can also seed it again. I also mentioned the lavender, and here you can see we're just barely starting to have some of the flowers. In the front yard where I got the cutting that this is from, that one has a lot more flowers on it, so we might be able to do a harvest on that tomorrow maybe. And then this is cleavers. As you can see, it's that kind of Velcro leaf and stem. And I mentioned they have these tiny little white flowers, and these produce those sticky little seed balls. And this we could also probably do a harvest on and get a whole bunch of somewhat medicinal tea. So I have been doing a tea harvest today with all the mint and such, but I suppose I could extend that into a full-blown tea harvest. So that's all I have. I think I showed all of the options that I have in my garden for tea. Obviously, one of the glaring aspects, I did not showcase any actual tea that you would get green tea or black tea from. I don't have any. I don't actually know what conditions tea takes to grow, and I would be interested in growing it if I got my hands on some, but I just don't. I've never really seen it offered. I think I might have seen like Japan holly, but I don't have any of those. I don't even know how you grow them. I'm super uneducated about growing actual tea. And I guess the other message that I would want to be able to get out from this is that you can be like fully self-sufficient in some aspects of your consumption. You could possibly be 100% self-sufficient in garlic, like I've been this year, or in things like salad greens, or maybe apples or something like that. It's very, very, very challenging to be 100% self-sufficient on all food that you consume, but you can start with very manageable things like all of your herbal tea needs and making your own tea blends. It's really, really prolific, mint and the fennel and other herbs that I shared today, and it would be really easy to be 100% self-sufficient on your herbal tea, even in a small space. I know I do have a relatively large yard, but most of it is currently grass for my dog to run around in. So if we think about the small regions that I do have, we have a lot of potential for growing a lot of herbal tea. Maybe use that as some inspiration for your own garden. Thank you as always for watching, and if you enjoyed this, consider sharing it with a friend, and I will talk to you again soon.